He made me feel so creepy, so unsafe. The way he kept staring, always hovering around. Then my stepdaughter lied, and my wife just instantly believed her. She looked at me and said, "I think you should leave." So I got quiet. I spent the next weeks systematically dismantling their finances and their entire future, using 17 years of documentation as my weapon. The pill bottle didn't shatter when it hit the floor, you know? It just rolled away. The cap popped right off, and the pills spilled out across the hardwood like a shower of tiny, plastic betrayals. That sound is what I remember. Not the screaming, not the doors slamming. Just that soft, rattling sound of my blood pressure pills spreading out on the floor. "I think you should leave," she repeated. It was the same flat tone she used last week when she asked me to change the broken porch light. The same tone she used to remind me about her dry cleaning. But this time, she wasn't talking about the store. She meant the house, our life, everything we were. Standing right behind her, her daughter had her arms crossed, waiting for something to happen. I barely recognized the girl. I used to see her every Christmas, spoiled, a little smug, but usually manageable. This was different. She wasn't gloating. She was just observing, patiently. "What?" I asked. I made myself say it again, slower, hoping the repetition might somehow dull the edges of the command. "I what?" My wife's jaw tightened. She couldn't even look me in the eye. "That you watch her, that you make her feel weird. You hover around me." I felt the air seize up in the room. Hover? What is that even supposed to mean? I asked. "She feels unsafe." "Alan, unsafe." That word, unsafe, it landed like a bullet in a silent cathedral. Not uncomfortable, not annoyed. Unsafe. It's the word that immediately turns neighbors into strangers and turns a devoted husband into a suspect. And the terrifying part? It didn't matter one bit that it wasn't true. It only mattered that she believed it. There was zero opportunity to explain. No clear accusation, just this poisonous insinuation wrapped in just enough suggestion to utterly ruin everything. I looked at her daughter. She didn't even flinch, just blinked slowly, like she knew exactly how this scene was going to play out because she had rehearsed it. "I'll go," I heard myself say. You'd expect a man to fight, to scream, to beg, but something deep inside me, something old and exhausted, just shut down. I grabbed my keys, picked up my half-packed bag, and walked right out the front door. Nobody asked where I was going to sleep. No one asked if I had cash for a motel. They just didn't care. That night, I sat in my truck, engine off, staring blankly at the dashboard as if it held the answers to my life. I had been her stepfather for 17 years. I paid for the braces, the school tuition, the car insurance. I literally taught her how to parallel park. I cheered when she graduated, and I clapped when she got accepted into that master's program, even though I knew she'd used AI to touch up her essays. But all it took was one look, one sentence. "He makes me feel weird." You don't have to be guilty to be thrown away. You just need to become an inconvenience. If this story is hitting you harder than you expected, if you've ever felt years of sacrifice disappear between someone else's words, please consider subscribing. Most people listen without ever tapping that button, but honestly, it's what keeps our team going, telling these tough stories. I checked into some roadside motel. The lights buzzed. The towels were paper thin. I didn't sleep, and it wasn't even the shock of the situation. It was the silence I couldn't stop thinking about. No huge fight. No dramatic text message revealing betrayal. Just a quiet, clean eviction from the life I helped build, all without a shred of due process. I thought about calling a friend, but I stopped myself. Not because I didn't have anyone, but because I couldn't bear to say the words out loud. She thinks I'm creepy. Her daughter lied. How do you tell that story without sounding exactly like the disturbed person they're accusing you of being? Instead, I sat fully dressed on that bed, watching the cheap ceiling fan spin like time spiraling down a drain. And then it hit me. A revelation I probably should have had years ago. They didn't want the truth. They just wanted me gone. So, I started writing. Not some melodramatic manifesto, not a sad, self-pitying diary entry. A list. 3 names, specifically, not therapists, not friends. An accountant, a lawyer, and an investigator. And underneath those 3 names, I wrote 2 words in all caps. Phase 1. When she was 10, she used to sneak into the garage while I was working on the lawnmower. She'd sit on the concrete floor in her little rubber sandals, asking questions like, "Why do spark plugs smell weird?" I always answered her, every single question, even the silly ones she already knew the answer to, just because she wanted the attention. I bought her first camera. I co-signed her first apartment lease. I was the one who waited for excruciating hours outside her college dorm after she called me, sobbing because her roommate had moved out and left a huge mess. I cleaned the whole place myself while she cried into a weighted blanket. 17 years of that. No, I wasn't her biological father, but I was there, present, steady, and, maybe, foolish for thinking any of that mattered. I was the one who stayed up late editing her college essays while she was out partying. I was the only person who knew exactly how much was left on her student loans, even when she didn't. I even took out a second mortgage on our house so she could afford that unpaid internship in Manhattan, the one she spent months bragging about, with its fancy networking dinners and $20 salads that paid for themselves. I paid for it all, in silence, without any fanfare. And now? Now I was just a shadow cast too long in her direction. A face that lingered awkwardly in the hallway. A A stepfather who hovered. It's funny, I used to truly believe that shared history counted for something. I sat at the flimsy motel desk, lit only by a flickering sconce that buzzed louder than the AC unit. On a notepad I grabbed from the corner gas station, I wrote the names in neat block letters. Bricks, my accountant. A retired Marine with eyes like steel and a memory like a trap. Carla, my lawyer. Sharp, surgical. She once told me, emotion ruins precision. You want to win? Be cold. Marcus, my private investigator. Soft-spoken, a former compliance auditor. He likes to start small and dig quietly. Beneath their names, again in all caps, Phase 1. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I needed protection. Step 1 was financial. Isolate all assets. Step 2. Gather all records, absolutely everything. Bank statements, tax files, every tuition receipt, every email I sent her with an attached invoice, the digital trail of 17 years of financial contribution. I remember one Christmas clearly, maybe 5 years ago. She hadn't gotten into her dream college, and she was having a breakdown. She locked herself in her room, wouldn't talk to anyone but me. She handed me her phone one night and just said, "Can you fix it?" She meant her essay, her whole application. I rewrote it from scratch while she slept off a panic attack. She got in. She never thanked me. That version of the essay is still saved on my external hard drive, complete with metadata. Just like the email she sent me a month ago, asking if I could help a little bit with the security deposit on her new apartment, which, of course, I did. And just like the incredibly sarcastic voice memo she once sent a friend, where she joked, "Alan is basically my wallet with legs." She accidentally left that voice memo in a shared cloud folder that she forgot I had access to. People think the past is gone, buried, but it's not. It's dated, backed up, and perfectly cataloged. History doesn't just fade away. It just waits for you to pull it out of the drawer. And that's exactly what I was doing now. Not reacting, not grieving, but preparing. Let her think she won. Let them all laugh at brunch about how weird I'd become. Let my wife tell her sisters that I was gone for good. None of that truly mattered. I wasn't mourning. I was moving. The motel Wi-Fi was awful, but I didn't care. I tethered a portable hotspot, logged into my cloud drive, and started compiling, cross-referencing, and categorizing. I needed everything in perfect chronological order. Expenses, gifts, tuition payments, lease agreements, every single penny, every sacrifice, every traceable breadcrumb. Because when the time came to finally cut ties, I didn't want closure. I wanted documentation. I didn't care if this ever saw a judge's eyes. I wanted to win in silence. The kind of silence that is irreversible. The kind that leaves such a clean mark they don't even realize they've been cut until they start bleeding out. That's what I wrote at the bottom of the page before I turned off the lamp. This time, I'm keeping the receipts. He used to be a lot more present, my wife's sister said, carefully folding her napkin as if the accusation needed a polite little wrapper. She's worried. We all are. It was one of those trendy brunch spots, all clean glass walls and overpriced bowls of fruit. My chair was empty, naturally. I wasn't invited, but I heard about the conversation from the hostess later. Her cousin did our landscaping. She told me they stayed for hours, drinking mimosas, dissecting me like a bad autopsy, passing me around a table of women who had collectively decided, without any evidence, that I was a ticking time bomb. She says he's been drinking more, my wife added, letting the accusation hang there just long enough for one of them to nod in agreement. Not a shred of truth. I don't even keep alcohol in the house. Never have. My father was an alcoholic, and I swore I never would be. But logic means nothing when you're painting a man in shadow. Then the daughter chimed in. He gets edgy. He watches me when I walk by. He just stares. It didn't matter that I was the one who installed the hallway camera for her safety after her purse was stolen. It didn't matter that I was paying for the damn food they were currently eating while they discussed me like a cold case murder. She says she's scared, and that's the only thing that matters, right? No bruises, no threats, just a whisper that makes you instantly a liability. But while they were constructing their flimsy little gossip shack out of fiction and Chardonnay, I was sitting in a notary's lobby, signing away small pieces of the life we used to share. Nothing major yet, just the boring, unsexy stuff. The backup car transferred into an LLC holding company. The joint safety deposit box emptied and replaced with a notarized letter of sole ownership. The wedding ring insurance policy quietly canceled. No notifications sent out. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't give any dramatic speeches. I simply stopped being predictable. The very next morning, I had a meeting at the bank. I'd scheduled it 3 weeks prior, before the accusation, before the motel. Just a routine financial review, they thought. I smiled, wore a neutral gray jacket, and shook hands. Mr. Franklin, today we'll be reviewing the joint savings account. I leaned forward. Actually, I'd like to restructure it. Separate it into a marital exempt trust. My name only. No transfers in or out without my direct authorization. The banker hesitated. That will revoke her access. Yes, I said. She wanted space. I'm giving it to her. I signed the documents neatly. I even cracked a small joke about interest rates. The banker laughed, completely oblivious that he was witnessing a silent divorce, one signature at a time. Back at the motel, I updated my spreadsheet. Every line item was meticulously labeled, joint, private, liquid, protected. Her favorite phrase used to be, what's mine is yours. She even had it cross-stitched on a pillow once. Now, I'd rewritten the phrase, "What was shared is now divided." They assumed I would sulk, that I would completely spiral out of control. That's the danger of whispers. They become self-fulfilling prophecies. People don't stop to check the facts. They just squint long enough to convince themselves the blurry image is real. At a dinner party with her social group, she casually brought up that I had stopped being affectionate, that I was just a bitter, retired man, and that she was worried about the kind of man he is turning into. No one bothered to ask if she was still cashing the pension checks I earned. No one asked why she hadn't updated her resume in over a decade or why her daughter was still living rent-free in the pool house. But I never defended myself. I let them talk, because while they were busy building their fictional stories, I was busy building my exits. One afternoon, I stood in the hallway of our old house, while the new locksmith changed all the cylinder locks. He asked if I wanted to keep her key code active. No, I said. Reset everything. New codes, new key cards, facial recognition off. Got it. Also, I added, disable the voice commands. It recognizes my tone. He looked at me, confused. I didn't elaborate. I left a note in the drawer. One sentence, you said you wanted space. I gave her a palace. Only she didn't realize it wasn't truly hers anymore. I could tell by her greeting that she thought she was about to win. Not apologize, not explain. Have you had time to reflect? She asked, her voice calm and casual, as if this whole thing was just a minor marital spat, and I had simply needed a long walk, and now I was ready to come home and act grateful for the boot print on my back. I have, I said. Good, she replied, sounding cheerful. Because I have, too. And I think if we both acknowledge that mistakes were made, I am free this Thursday. I cut her off. Let's meet at 10 o'clock at the Mirror Cafe. She actually paused, just for a second. I guess she expected more pushback. A plea, maybe a desperate apology. Definitely not punctuality. And certainly not a cafe. The Mirror Cafe was neutral ground. She loved their pecan cookies. Always said they reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen. I arrived 10 minutes early. I already had the table. I already had the envelope sitting on my lap, tucked neatly under the corner of the menu. She walked in wearing a light gray jacket and that practiced, neutral expression women use when they want to look composed yet morally superior. I'm not mad. I'm not hurt. I'm just disappointed in you, Alan. She slid into the booth. You look well, thank you, I said. I didn't return the compliment. We made small talk for about 2 minutes. She asked if I was still staying at that motel off the highway. She said the word motel like it was a highly contagious disease. I nodded politely. She mentioned her sister was worried. I didn't respond. Then she leaned forward, resting both hands on her expensive latte. I think if you were willing, we could talk about what moving forward would look like as partners. I slid the manila envelope across the table. She looked at it, blinking. What is this? The pre-filed divorce papers. You don't have to do anything but sign them. She stared. You're just ending it like this? No therapy. No, Alan. This was supposed to be a conversation. We were fixing things. I didn't, I said. You fixed something. You fixed it, so I became disposable. She shook her head. I never said that. You didn't have to. You just opened the door and stood aside, while someone else pushed me out of my own house. She looked at the envelope like it was a ticking bomb. And just to be clear, I continued, I'm not contesting anything. You want the furniture? Fine. You want the wine glasses? Take them. This isn't about stuff. It's about math and boundaries. Her lips pressed into a thin line. What exactly does that mean? It means anything I wanted to keep, I've already moved. Anything I wanted to protect is already locked down. You don't have to worry about a negotiation. There won't be one. She didn't open the envelope there, just nodded slowly, desperately trying to maintain her composure. I will look this over. But Alan, this feels cold. I took a sip of my coffee. Well, you told your sister I'd been drinking. I figured I'd keep the temperature consistent. We didn't hug. We didn't say goodbye. She walked out in a state of slow confusion, the envelope clutched in one hand, the latte in the other. She didn't know yet. Not truly, because her daughter's name was scrawled on the back flap of that envelope in black ink. She opened it an hour later, sitting alone at the dining room table I built. Inside were the divorce papers, signed, witnessed, and dated, in a second, smaller, sealed envelope addressed to her daughter. I never heard her scream, but I can imagine it was loud enough to disturb the neighbors. The voicemail arrived just after noon. I was sitting outside the motel room, drinking terrible gas station coffee, watching a construction crew across the street digging a pointless trench for a sidewalk. The sound of the jackhammers covered the beginning of the message, but it didn't matter. I recognized the voice instantly. Mom, pick up. He really did it. He actually filed it. Everything I said, it's all on record now. They're investigating me. Click. No, hello, Alan. No apology, no hesitation, just absolute, full-blown panic, volume cranked to 11. I didn't even listen to the rest. I didn't need to. I knew exactly which part of the trap had just snapped shut. The complaint wasn't some theatrical piece of writing. It wasn't personal. It was structured, chronological, and almost boringly precise. Exhibit A. A forwarded email from her to a friend, calling me emotionally dumb enough to fund her forever. Exhibit B. A screenshot of an old group chat she forgot I had access to, where she joked, he is too scared of mom to ever stand up to me. I could say he looked at me funny and he would leave. Exhibit C, the voice memo, the one she recorded drunk at a party, explicitly mocking me. Alan is like a sad puppy with a penchant. I swear I could fake a panic attack and he would hand over the deed to the house. All of it was time-stamped, and all of it was submitted, not to a judge, but to a few far more devastating audiences. First, the University Ethics Committee. She was applying for a prestigious PhD fellowship. Her application required a sworn statement of moral integrity. Lying about familial abuse, falsely implicating a guardian for personal gain. That's a clear violation of Article 12.4 of the university's Code of Ethics. I didn't accuse her of anything. I just submitted the evidence and let the language of their own bylaws do the hard work. Second, the nonprofit. This was a shiny, small organization with a mission to empower young women to lead with empathy. She had a job offer pending with them. I sent them a simple dossier, no editorializing, just her own words, her own mocking laughter, her own duplicity, printed in 12-point font with an audio backup. The hiring board didn't need any more than that. Third, the trust fund. When she was 16, I set up a future planning trust in her name, $50,000. My lawyer was listed as the secondary contact. It had specific stipulations. No withdrawals without confirmation of her academic and employment standing. A safety net, not a personal piggy bank. Last week, I sent my lawyer an addendum along with a letter requesting a temporary freeze, pending a formal review of character eligibility, under Clause 6C. That freeze went into effect the same morning as the voicemail. She tried to log in. Access denied. She tried to email the trustee. Auto reply, pending investigation. No action can be taken at this time. She tried to call me. I saw the phone vibrate twice. I let it ring until it died. I wasn't angry. I wasn't celebrating. But there was a quiet, deep satisfaction, like setting a broken bone back into place. This was never about revenge. It was about immaculate record-keeping. She had turned my life into a kangaroo court, serving up accusations like canapes at a self-pity party, hoping no one noticed she never served a main course. I simply gave her audience the receipts. And the most beautiful part? No confrontation, no counter-accusations from me. I didn't need to stand in front of anyone and plead for my name. I just let her own words speak for themselves. I deleted the voicemail, not because I was being cruel, but because its purpose had been fulfilled. The first scream always is. She expected to find dust, maybe some dead houseplants, maybe one of my passive-aggressive notes that she could show her sister and mock over wine. Look what he left. Can you believe it? She expected bitterness, retaliation, the sad, desperate clinging of a man who still thought there was something left to save. What she found was a profound absence. The front door opened with her key, but only after a 2-second delay. The kind of delay that makes you realize the lock hesitated to recognize you. The kind of delay that signals, this place isn't waiting for you anymore. She walked in and instantly noticed the echo. The couch was gone. Not all the furniture, just the things that mattered to me. The leather armchair I inherited from my father. The oak desk from the study. The vintage radio I used to fix on quiet weekends. They were all legally mine. Moved out quietly. No moving truck parked outside. No announcements. Just gone. The joint photos were still on the wall, but only the frames. I had removed the prints and left the glass. A rude ghost. A constant reminder. In the kitchen, the overhead lights clicked on. She saw the sticky note first, centered perfectly on the refrigerator door. Yellow, neatly written in my hand. Space requested. Granted. Nothing else. No signature. No flourish. Just the final, quiet answer to the first move she made. She opened the refrigerator, empty. Then the cupboards, also empty. She walked through the dining room. No wine rack, no sideboard. The chairs were still there, but the table was not. She picked up her phone to turn off the living room security camera, a habit she'd had for years. Access denied. She tried again. Device not recognized. Her Face ID was rejected. She walked over to the hallway console. She tried to reset the system. It asked for a master admin password. She entered the old one. Denied. She tried a second one. Still denied. She stood in the center of the home we built and realized she no longer had control over a single square inch of it. Not legally, not digitally, and certainly not emotionally. She called her sister. It went straight to voicemail. She called again. This time it rang once before connecting. I think I made a mistake, she whispered. Silence on the other end. Then a hesitant, cautious question. What kind of mistake? I think he's really done with me. With everything. Her sister asked something, and she didn't answer. Something about the papers, about exactly what she had signed, about why Alan, the man they all mocked for being too quiet, too soft, too much of a coward, was suddenly not picking up his phone. She went back to the kitchen, opened the pantry. Nothing. Not even a can of beans. Just a single sealed envelope on the top shelf with her name written on the front. Inside, a printed receipt from a moving company, paid in full, and an inventory list of every item removed, each categorized as separate property under state code, cross-referenced with a pre-existing property agreement she had signed 8 years ago without reading it, back when she was recovering from gallbladder surgery, and handed me power of attorney with a laugh. Don't go buying a boat or anything. No boats. Just freedom. In the back corner of the garage, she noticed something else was missing. Something she hadn't even known she valued until that moment. the pegboard where I hung every tool I owned. The empty hooks now looked like cold, hard punctuation marks, full stops. She stood in that silent house and realized I hadn't just disappeared. I had left intentionally, legally, without ever raising my voice or breaking a single glass. She thought I was sulking, but I wasn't. I was closing doors. They chose a neutral law firm downtown. One of those excessively sterile places with leather chairs no one ever sinks into, an abstract art meant to impress clients who haven't felt anything real in years. She arrived in a navy blue blazer, her hair pulled back in a tight bun like a noose, flanked by her lawyer, a man in his mid-30s who looked like he still practiced cross-examinations in the mirror. Alan was already seated, completely calm, hands folded, wearing no tie. The only paper in front of him was a single manila folder, the same size and color as the one he had given her at the cafe. The symmetry was deliberate. The introductions were brief. Her lawyer opened his leather-bound portfolio and cleared his throat with the arrogant confidence of a man who thought he was walking into a simple cleanup job, not a demolition. "Mr. Franklin," he began, "we are here today in good faith to review the expectations of alimony, your pension plan, and the joint property assets, including real estate and retirement benefits. My client is prepared to negotiate a fair distribution." Alan's lawyer, a woman with wire-framed glasses and an expression that permanently hovered between amused and lethal, opened her folder, slid it across the table without a word, and waited. Her lawyer skimmed the first few pages, slowed down, flipped back, scanned again, then stopped. He looked at Alan's wife and asked, "You have already signed this?" "What?" she said, narrowing her eyes. He turned the folder toward her and pointed to a line. "Property reallocation complete. Pension rollover finalized. Protected status." She blinked, then looked up. "I have not. No, I have never signed that." Alan cleared his throat softly. "It was not necessary." Silence. She turned to him. "What do you mean it was not necessary?" Alan kept his voice even, measured. "Remember the gallbladder surgery 2 years ago? You were worried about being under anesthesia for so long. You said something about not wanting to deal with paperwork when you got home, so you gave me a temporary power of attorney." "That was 2 years ago," she said, her voice rising now. "Temporary." Alan nodded. "It was. Except you never formally revoked it, which makes it still active. Durable by default, unless formally rescinded, which you never did." Her lawyer opened his mouth, closed it, checked his notes, then muttered, "He is technically right." "Technically," she hissed. Alan's lawyer spoke then, finally, concisely, precisely. "All filings were made in strict accordance with the powers granted. Every single action was dated, notarized, and filed with the appropriate disclosures. Nothing was hidden. You simply were not looking." Her breathing became quick and shallow. "You moved the pension." "It is in a protected rollover," Alan said. "Your name is no longer on it. Legally, it hasn't been for weeks. The house is already divided. You get the foundation. I got everything on top of it. Alimony does not apply. The trust fund you are currently living off of is still active. That's out of my courtesy, though. That is generosity, not obligation." She stood up so fast her chair screeched against the floor, but her lawyer didn't move. He just stared at the folder like it was a patient with a flatlining EKG. "You can't do this," she snapped. "You can't just rewire our entire life without." "You asked me to leave," Alan said, still seated. "You said you needed space, so I gave you more than space. I gave you distance. You just never asked what came with it." Her lawyer gently touched her wrist, trying to get her to sit down again. Alan slid one final sheet across the table. "This is a revocation form. If you want to terminate the power of attorney, go ahead and sign it. It won't change anything that has already been filed, but it might make you feel better." She stared at the paper, her eyes blazing, but she never signed it. Not because she didn't want to, but because she finally understood the depth of her error. She had handed him the keys, and he hadn't changed the locks out of spite. He had done it with her own signature, her own authority, her own implicit blessing. The room fell completely silent. Alan stood up, buttoned his jacket. "We are done here," he said with the quiet, devastating finality of a man who had zero left to negotiate. She sank back into her chair, not broken, not angry, just profoundly stunned, because she thought he was reacting emotionally, but he had been planning surgically, and the incision was already closed and healing. It started with the email. She opened it in the middle of a group chat where 4 of her friends were planning a weekend trip to Charleston. The subject line read, "Offer status update." She smiled at first, thinking it was the formal confirmation. Then she read the body. "Due to unresolved ethical concerns arising from recently submitted third-party documentation, we are unable to move forward with your onboarding at this time. We wish you the best in your future endeavors." She blinked. Read it again. Her pulse was hammering. There was no phone number, no explanation, just a wall of cold legalese and a dead link. She called them. Straight to voicemail. She called again, blocked. Within an hour, her work-associated email account with the nonprofit was suspended. Locked out. The application portal vanished. Next was the internship, the one she'd boasted about relentlessly. A highly competitive spot at a policy think tank that handed out positions like candy to the connected and crushed everyone else for minor grammatical errors. She'd posted about it 5 times on Instagram. "My future starts here." grateful to join a team that fights for what is right. They sent her a letter, not an email. Typed, sealed, old school. Brutal. Your internship at the Institute for Ethical Futures has been revoked effective immediately, pending an internal review of integrity concerns submitted by a verified third party. We reserve the right to contact you if any clarification is required. But at this time, your access has been removed from all platforms. No clarification was offered, just immediate removal. She called her mother. No answer. So, she did something reckless and stormed Alan's office building. Not the house, the office. The receptionist tried to smile, tried to be helpful. Hi, can I help you? Where is he? She asked, trembling. Alan Franklin. I need to talk to him now. I'm sorry. I know he is here. You people think you are so. Security arrived in seconds. They didn't touch her. They didn't yell. They just positioned themselves quietly between her and the elevators. Ma'am, you will need to wait outside. We have been asked not to allow any disruptions. She pulled out her phone, dialed Alan. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. She screamed at the receptionist, called her useless, called them all cowards. Then she turned, marched toward the glass exit, and kicked it hard on her way out, the heel of her shoe striking against the door frame. Outside, no one followed her. No one even looked at her. She stood on the steps, totally humiliated, heart racing, unsure whether to scream or break down crying. And then her phone buzzed. A text from her ex-boyfriend. One line, you told me he was a creep. Now your name is on a compliance report. The phone slipped from her hand. Not by accident. It just slid from her grip, as if her own body couldn't decide what to hold on to anymore. She drove home in total silence. No music, just the low hum of the tires and a growing, horrifying understanding. By the time she reached the front door, her hands were visibly shaking. She didn't greet her mother, didn't ask what happened at the lawyer's office. She walked straight past her, into her childhood bedroom, and locked the door. She opened her laptop. She tried to log into her school portal. Access restricted. She opened her social media accounts. The direct messages were already pouring in. Is this true? You're the girl who lied about her stepdad. You should be ashamed. Because of you, real victims aren't believed. She closed the laptop, rolled onto her side, and curled up like a small child waiting for the world to simply disappear. But it didn't. And for the first time in her life, no one was coming to fix it. Not her mother, not her friends, and especially not the man she had accused. He didn't email. He didn't text. He didn't call to check in. There was no huge confrontation, no dramatic final scene filled with tears and regret. Just a quiet manila envelope with 2 sealed letters inside. One marked Catherine, the other Mira, and a tracking number. He dropped it at the post office wearing a windbreaker and a baseball cap, nodded politely to the clerk, and then walked out into a cool October morning, like he was just mailing his bills. He didn't stick around for the letters to arrive. He went straight to the post office box, the one he had opened during his second week at the motel, when the air still smelled of drywall and betrayal, and turned the key one last time. Inside, there was absolutely nothing. He left the key in the lock and walked away. He never looked back. Catherine found her letter 2 days later. It arrived on a Saturday morning, mixed in with some junk mail and a late insurance statement. She opened it at the kitchen table, still in her robe, expecting some sort of plea, a half apology with room for negotiation, a confession that he had overreacted and still wanted her back. What she got was far worse, because it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It was just finished. No anger, no revenge, just boundaries. You asked me to leave, so I did. Permanently. That was all. No signature, no return address, just his handwriting. Steady, clear, emotionless. It was the kind of letter you would frame if you were proud. The kind you keep hidden in a drawer if you are consumed by shame and know you deserve every single word. She read it 3 times, then set it down without even touching her coffee. Mira's letter came in the same envelope, but she didn't open it right away. She stared at her name on the front for 20 agonizing minutes. Her mother didn't push her, didn't ask what it said, just slid it across the table and left the room. Finally, Mira opened it with trembling fingers. A single line typed in black ink on plain white paper. I hope you someday understand what truth costs when it is used as a weapon. There was no Dear Mira, no sign-off, just a cold, hard verdict. She folded it slowly, carefully, as if the paper itself might shatter if bent the wrong way. Upstairs, she stared at the laptop she hadn't touched in 3 days. The inbox was still full. Some of the messages were cruel. Others were even worse. They were compassionate. You made a mistake. You'll grow from this. We all mess up. They weren't wrong. But that wasn't the part that made her feel sick. It was that Alan hadn't responded to any of it. Not a call, not a text, not a single one of her screams. He hadn't defended himself publicly, hadn't argued, hadn't sought sympathy. He simply disappeared. But not like someone running away, but like someone who was firmly closing a door. No noise, no mess, just silence, locked from the other side. That afternoon, she turned off her last remaining phone, the one she kept for emergencies. She called the number transfer line, had them cancel the account, ported nothing, blocked every possible shared platform, deleted every password recovery email they could have ever used, and even closed the backup account only his accountant knew about. Then, at 6:30 in the evening, he did one last thing. He took a pen, wrote his name in the top corner of a clean sheet of paper, and drew a final horizontal line right through it. One smooth motion, a perfect cut. It meant nothing to anyone else, but to him, it was the signature of true freedom. The last sound Catherine ever heard from Alan was the mailbox closing, and it didn't echo. Mira sat in front of her laptop for a full minute before she dared to click open the email. Her hands were cold with sweat and hovering over the mouse. This was her final shot, a competitive research fellowship through a think tank desperate to show its commitment to second chances. A quiet contact had put in a good word for her. She had entirely rewritten her proposal, polished every line of her bio, and scrubbed anything remotely connected to the scandal. It was supposed to be clean. The subject line was simply, status notification Q1 fellowship cycle. She held her breath, and there it was. Thank you for your application to the Future Fellowship Program. Unfortunately, we are unable to approve your candidacy at this time. This decision was made following a thorough background and ethics review, which revealed inconsistencies and concerns related to previous submissions. Due to unresolved ethical concerns from prior application materials, we are unable to consider you for future fellowship cycles. We wish you all the best. Not a call, not a meeting, not an explanation beyond that one damning line. Unresolved ethical concerns. 6 syllables that sounded clinical until she realized they translated to permanently untrustworthy. She didn't scream this time, didn't call anyone, just stared at the screen as her entire future withered up like a puddle under a locked door. Downstairs, her mother sat at the kitchen table, staring at her own envelope. It had come in the regular mail, with no return address. Inside, a court-certified document, the final divorce decree, and a single yellow sticky note taped crookedly to the last page. Please forward to Alan's attorney. She frowned in confusion, then started to read. The assets had been divided, she knew that. She had signed the agreement after weeks of brutal legal wrangling, hoping there would be something left once the smoke cleared. A car, a portion of the savings, maybe access to the cabin in Maine. Instead, she read a clause she hadn't noticed before, buried deep in the filing, titled Marital Asset Redistribution, Beneficiary Reassignment. And below it, the words, all remaining marital assets, including but not limited to unclaimed joint property, savings, investment accounts, and non-separately titled real estate, shall be redirected into an irrevocable trust for the benefit of Mr. Franklin's niece, Julia Rowe. Said trust shall be managed by third-party fiduciary services with no access granted to the former spouse or her dependent. This clause is non-contestable. She read it again and again. Then she dropped the pages on the table as if they had physically burned her fingers. This was not just about the money. It was about the statement it made. That even the parts he hadn't touched, the things she passively assumed might still benefit her, had been sealed off with 0 loopholes, 0 appeals. He hadn't left her destitute. He had left her irrelevant. Across the room, the old family photo was still on the bookshelf. Mira was 8 in that picture. Alan had a hand on her shoulder, smiling like he truly believed in something. Now, years later, he was gone. Not just absent, but totally erased. A ghost who left behind only bank statements and bulletproof signatures. She wanted to rip it all up. The letter, the decree, the damn sticky note. But she didn't. She just sat there, staring. Upstairs, Mira's bedroom door remained closed and silent. No typing, no angry music, no desperate phone calls. Just the faint glow of a laptop screen that no longer contained a future. There were no goodbyes, no final conversations, no last-minute redemption arcs. Just one cold, undeniable truth. The man they cast out had not just left. He had taken the very ground out from under their feet. Amen. If Alan's actions were financially brilliant but emotionally devastating, does that make him a villain, a victim who finally fought back, or just a man who prioritized self-preservation over decency? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments.